This man right here just highlighted the insane double standard that the NFL has when it comes to their owners. This is Carolina Panthers owner David Tepper, and he is quickly becoming one of the worst owners in the history of professional sports, let alone the history of the NFL. He's starting to become the next Dan Snyder. David Tepper is a spoiled, rotten billionaire who purchased the team from previous owner Jerry Richardson in 2019, and ever since then, the Carolina Panthers have gone from one of the most respected, revered organizations in football to an incompetent, laughing stock of the NFL who can't even fill their own seats on game day. Literally, Bank of America Stadium is overtaken pretty much every single week by opposing teams' fans. That was never the case before David Tepper took over as the owner of the Carolina Panthers. David Tepper has overseen 6 different head coaches, if you count interims, since 2019. It all started when he fired Ron Rivera, then hired Matt Rule. In between them, he had Perry Fewell, I believe it was, as the interim. Then, after Matt Rule was fired, Steve Wilkes was given the job in an interim and did a really phenomenal job in his several games as the Panthers interim head coach. I remember he absolutely blew the doors off of my Denver Broncos in one of those games. The Panthers looked like a very well-coached team, and Steve Wilkes, who was a native of Charlotte, was heavily beloved by both the leaders in that locker room as well as the Carolina Panthers fan base. Yet David Tepper decided, oh no, he's not the guy long-term. He's not my guy. He's not going to be my puppet. He's not going to be my yes man. So Tepper goes out and hires Frank Reich, who, yes, he also has some connection with the fan base because he was the very first starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. But when you go out and you basically discard to the side a coach that did a really good job surrounded by a disaster of a situation after the Panthers had traded away their best player in Christian McCaffrey, who, if you listen to players such as Cam Newton, the Panthers had no clue how to use Christian McCaffrey properly. It wasn't until he got to San Francisco that he's really been able to blossom into his true potential. And that's crazy to say because Christian McCaffrey had a 1,000-yard season with the Carolina Panthers one year in 2019. But it felt like the Panthers didn't know how to manage that special of talent. We'll go into that a little bit later. But David Tepper has been sorely responsible for all of these terrible decisions for the Carolina Panthers organization. And now these terrible decisions are starting to show their ugly head on the field. I mean, the Panthers have the worst record in the NFL right now. They traded 2 first-round picks and their number 1 receiver to the Chicago Bears in order to get Bryce Young. Oh yeah, and by the way, the Panthers coaching staff didn't even want Bryce Young. They wanted C.J. Stroud. There's a very famous clip of then Panthers quarterback coach Josh McCown telling C.J. Stroud that we're looking forward to when you get to Charlotte, buddy. They wanted C.J. Stroud, but David Tepper wanted Bryce Young because he watched all kinds of scouting videos and he didn't even look at the tape. He just listened to a bunch of analysts that said that Bryce Young was a better player than C.J. Stroud. And don't get me wrong, if I were in Tepper's position, I probably also would have wanted Bryce Young. But if my coaching staff, who has the football acumen, says that they want a different guy, I'm probably going to listen to them. But not David Tepper. And now we see the results on the field. The Panthers have fired their coaching staff. Bryce Young looks in way over his head, and it all came to a head this past Sunday in Jacksonville when the Jaguars were shut out 26-0. David Tepper's frustration reached an all-time high, and there was a video circulating of him throwing a drink on a Jaguars fan. The Jaguars fan sure was giving him some heckling, but there's no excuse for that. You call security and you have that fan escorted out. You don't throw a drink on him, especially after out of a cup that you've been drinking from. God knows what diseases and bacteria you carry around in your mouth. I don't want that on my body. That's misdemeanor assault, man. If David Tepper had done that, if anybody else had done what David Tepper did, they would have gotten charges pressed against them for misdemeanor assault. If I had done that in my workplace, I likely would have been fired. All David Tepper gets is a $300,000 fine from the NFL, and he has to release a little piss poor statement that says that he should have let security handle it and that he was over emotional and he's super passionate about the team. Well, maybe if your team wasn't so incompetent due to your own doings, David, then you wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. It's so frustrating, the double standard that the NFL holds, because if, let's just say that was a player in the suite, like an inactive player, and they threw a drink on a fan, they would have been fined, they would have been suspended without pay, and depending on that player's status on the roster, they could have even been cut if it was like a lower end practice squad player or something like that. Instead, David Tepper, whose net worth is worth well over $20 billion, just gets a $300, not even slap on the wrist. $300,000 to him is basically like a box of Kleenex that he uses to blow his nose. I bet David Tepper literally has a stack of bills worth about 300 grand on his bedside table that he uses to blow his nose and scratch his ass with. Literally, that's what $300,000 is to a guy like David Tepper. If the NFL is serious about these owners being held accountable for their actions, then Tepper would have been suspended for at least 4 games, and he wouldn't have been able to reap the financial benefits of those games. The team could have gotten that money, but not the money that personally goes into Tepper's pockets, and basically, Tepper got off scot-free for this. You think back to 2009 when late Titans owner Bud Adams flipped the bird to a Buffalo Bills fan at Highmark Stadium, or at the time it was Ralph Wilson Stadium. He got a $250,000 fine for that. Tepper, for in essence committing misdemeanor assault, I don't know what would constitute it in the state of Florida, but I have to imagine that would be it. Tepper gets a $300,000, not even slap on the wrist, a blow on the wrist basically is what that is to him. And he still gets to attend games and still gets to reap the financial benefit of those games. That is not right, man. If David Tepper is truly going to get punished for that, you are going to have to hit him where it hurts, and that's deeper in the wallet than $300,000. I bet David Tepper laughed his ass off whenever he heard that he was just getting fined $300,000. Think about it. David Tepper is a guy who bought the property that the mansion of his old business partner who wronged him, that mansion stood on that property. Tepper bought it just so he could tear the mansion down and build a new, bigger one in its place just to spite his ex-business partner. That's the kind of guy that we're dealing with here in David Tepper. This is not a punishment for him, and it just continues to showcase that these owners are above the law and above the standard that everybody else in the NFL has to hold themselves to. And until the NFL starts appropriately punishing these owners for the crimes that they're committing, this kind of crap is only going to continue.